I'm Ryan Robertson, and this is not Max Stiles. But this is Missions Talk, brought to you by 9 Marks and Reaching and Teaching International Ministries. 9 Marks exists to equip church leaders with a biblical vision and practical resources for building healthy churches. To learn more about 9 Marks, visit 9marks.org. Reaching and Teaching serves local churches by helping them send qualified missionaries to make mature disciples, establish healthy churches, and train local leaders. You can find out more about Reaching and Teaching at rtim.org. Today with me is my friend Joe Yozawa, and we are shooting live in Tokyo, Japan. This is a first for Joe. Welcome, brother. Good to have you.
Glad to be here.
So we've never done a video recording before. Mac is not with us. He's currently in Louisville leading a conference, but I'm so excited to have this conversation with you about Tokyo. Welcome to Missions Talk.
Thank you for having me.
What I wanted to do today is talk to you a little bit about your own story, and then talk more about what the needs are in Japan and what you're seeing as it relates to the church and evangelism here in a place like Tokyo. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, my name is Joe Yozawa. I'm Japanese. My nationality is Japanese. My dad is actually Taiwanese.
Okay.
So I have a little bit of other Asian influences in my life, but I was born and raised here. My dad was raised here. I was born in Kanagawa, which is a prefecture. We don't have states or provinces. We have prefectures, right? So we have Tokyo, and I was born in Kanagawa, a prefecture south of Tokyo. Moved to Tokyo, we lived in Tokyo actually. My first year in Machida, and then moved to Meguro, which is near the Shibuya, kind of all that Shinjuku area, the metro area.
Okay.
So I was born and raised in a Christian household. My father is a pastor of a larger church here. Grew up hearing the gospel in our church. It was a church influenced by the purpose-driven movement.
Okay.
So very different ministry, theological philosophies, but they did preach the gospel clearly. So I heard the gospel growing up. I initially had a profession of faith when I was about 9 or 10.
Okay.
I was baptized then. With my sister. Turned out that wasn't the true confession. So I was saved around when I was 17.
Okay.
And then I was actually baptized at 3rd Avenue Baptist Church.
Yes, you were.
When I moved to Louisville, Kentucky.
That's fantastic. So, Joe, you and I were members at 3rd Avenue Baptist Church for a few more years before you moved back here.
I was, yep.
And so this is an exciting reunion of sorts.
This is.
Former member of 3rd. Brother, you mentioned a little bit about your church being influenced by the purpose-driven church movement, Rick Warren, all of that. What were some of the things that you would say characterize that movement for people who aren't familiar with the purpose-driven life, purpose-driven church?
Yeah. Positively, it was a time where community and small groups and those kind of things were kind of a hot topic. Yeah. So our church was one of the first churches to kind of implement a home group, small group style. But the other big stuff was a more maybe simplistic understanding of simple in the sense of we're just here to evangelize, seek. We used the word seeker sensitive, right?
Yep.
So basically we're here to just gather a lot of people, touch as many people as we can, and try to evangelize kind of through that. A lot less emphasis on maybe expository preaching or healthy church. So that wasn't, those kind of healthy church conversations weren't really a conversation. It was more about, okay, how do we kind of grow large enough and do the right programs and tweak our services in a way or do concerts to kind of appeal to the general audience.
Yeah. So basically using programs to grow the church.
Yes.
In many ways.
Exactly.
So evangelism, good. Let's draw them in with programs.
Yes.
Let's see them won to Christ. And then let's grow a church that way.
Yes. And it was very much an assimilation kind of, that's kind of another technical word.
Yeah.
But assimilation, so we had the 4 membership classes, which aren't really membership classes because you have your first membership class and you have 3 others that you kind of take later to kind of assimilate in as you kind of get closer to the core part of the church. So you kind of have basically 4 classes of church members, right?
Okay.
So the people who sign a card, they take maybe a 4-hour class, sign a card, and you're in.
Yeah.
And then you have another class to do ministry or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So
So you go kind of like 101 to 201 to 301 to
yes,
401.
exactly.
Okay. And you become more and more kind of like the church, assimilated into the church
Yes.
as you go through those classes. Okay. And then you moved to Louisville. Why did you move to Louisville?
So that's another long story. I try to make it short. So I went to Japanese school my whole life until I transferred to international school in high school.
Okay.
I transferred in. I was a junior in a Japanese school, and I transferred in and read it in my sophomore year. And that international school happened to be a Christian school.
Yeah.
So it was a bunch of MKs and a bunch of pastors' kids. So pretty similar experiences. And me and my friend Timothy, who's not here, who also is a member at 3rd Avenue.
You knew Timothy all the way back then?
I did.
Excellent.
We actually transferred in the same year.
Excellent.
We were
Timothy Seminoff, another brother from Japan.
Timothy Seminoff.
That's great.
We were in the same orientation
Okay.
meeting. So we came in and we were at, there was a youth event. There was an interdenominational group that was trying to reach our school, and they've been there for a long time. And at the time, things have changed now, but at the time, they would go, and it was very influenced by kind of different movements, but they didn't really open the Bible and teach the Bible to the students. So it's very emotionally driven, kind of typical youth group in a sense of you turn the lights down, it's Jesus and me, maybe a lot of motivational speeches, but not a lot of substantive teaching. So I kind of talked to Timothy, this is like our first year there, and saying, there's students here, they want to learn more. They don't know, we don't know what like a healthy preaching is, expository preaching is, if they're getting good biblical doctrine, but they would, if they're here, they would be open, I'm sure they'll be open to actually learning about the Bible. So me and Timothy and I, we started a Bible study on Friday afternoons after school or Friday night to kind of supplement this youth group.
Yeah. How old were you at this time?
I was 17, so I just became a Christian.
You had just become a Christian.
She was like 15.
Okay.
So so we started this, and then because it's a Christian school and it's interdenominational, we got a bunch of different people. We had like egalitarian, more liberal people.
Yeah.
You have your hard Presbyterians. You have your hyper charismatics. You have just different people. Missiologically, just influenced by different movements.
Yeah.
And they all have questions that are not answered, and they ask us because we're leading the Bible study. And doing that helped me to see, okay, there's a need in different communities in Japan, and I am at the moment not equipped to answer these questions and expose and show the Bible and teach that to these people. So that's where God gave me a heart to look for seminary or Bible school training.
That's great.
And I happened to stumble upon a video on YouTube about the history of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Is it the one where Al was talking to the chapel in the early 90s?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, and I looked at that, and knowing kind of what Christianity was like here, and kind of the different drifts that are happening, I was like, oh, there was a resurgence and a reformation like 30 years ago, like around the time when I was born, and they're still all alive, and they're all teaching at a school. So that piqued my interest my junior, senior year, and after kind of considering it, I was like, this is where I want to be trained and learn about the Bible and learn about God, and with the hopes of coming back and hopefully seeing that happen in Japan as well.
That's amazing. So what year did you move over to Louisville?
I moved over the summer of 2018.
Okay, so I remember this because when you were brought into membership at 3rd Avenue Baptist Church, it was announced that you were on some national winning football team as the quarterback. What's up with that?
So there's actually a little bit of misinformation. I was the receiver.
You were a receiver.
I was a receiver.
Okay.
I have played quarterback as well. So that's kind of the misunderstanding. So this is kind of a weird. I'm very American Baptist, even though I lived in Japan my whole life. Since my dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, and I'm a Southern Baptist pastor's kid, and I played American football. So yeah.
That's amazing. You assimilated super well into Louisville,
Yes,
now I understand.
yeah, everyone, yeah.
Okay.
I knew all the culture and everything.
Yeah, I totally wanted to be on your team at Thanksgiving when we were playing
there you
football.
go,
I was
yeah.
like, this guy has won national championships in Japan. I'm on his team.
The Turkey Bowl, yes.
That's right, the Turkey Bowl.
I remember that. So yes, I played, I did a lot of sports growing up.
Yeah.
I started flag football
Okay.
in my 6th grade. So elementary school actually goes up to 6th grade in Japan.
Okay.
So I started flag football. There's an unwritten rule that you can't play tackle until you're in high school.
Okay. It's
So
good for the brain.
It is.
Yep.
We're smart like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I played flag and touch football, which
Okay.
touch was you put pads on and you block, but you just can't tackle. So we played that, and my flag football team throughout my junior high years, we won the national tournament every year.
Wow.
So
So you were back to back to back.
we were back to back to back, and I want to say we won it the next year after I left, but I can't. I'm not sure. But we were all of my friends in that team are now playing for the D1 teams in Japan. So there's a big Japanese league, and they're all playing.
They're playing for it. Look
Yeah.
at that. Look at that. But you gave up your professional football in Japan aspirations to serve Jesus. I love it. I love it. So you did how many years at Southern?
I did the seminary track program.
Okay.
For those who don't know, that's a program where you get your bachelor's
Yeah.
and you get your MDiv in 5 years.
Excellent. And you're wearing a Boys College polo.
I am wearing a Boys
Shout out to Boys College.
Yeah, shout out to Boys College.
So it's a 5-year SEMTRAC program in which you get both your bachelor's degree and your MDiv.
MDiv, yes.
And you guys just slam it for 5 years in the books.
We do, yes.
And after you got your degree, what did you do?
So actually, right before I got my degree, I came back. So I'm married.
All right. You came back for a girl.
I did.
All right. I remember hearing about this. And we were like,
Yes.
wait, Joe had a girlfriend this whole time? Yeah, that's great.
Yes. So I was dating my now wife, Kana.
Okay.
And we wanted to get married. So I flew back my last year of my SEMTRAC because I didn't have a lot of credits left.
Okay.
So and to do my seminary training online for the last year.
Okay.
And now after I've graduated and a little bit before that, I've been involved with translating and editing some Japanese material that are translated from English
Okay.
with a little Bible school here.
So you're taking your seminary education, you're taking existing resources, you're translating them to Japanese to serve the church.
Yes.
That's super sweet. Brother, what do you aspire to do? Aspire.
Yes.
It's not, what are you called to do, but what are you
go.
aspiring
Yes.
to do here?
I aspire, personally, I would love to be, I do aspire to be an elder and a pastor in the future. I'm 25,
Yeah.
so we'll see where God takes me in the next however many years He has
Yeah.
me here. I also do have a huge passion for just seeing healthy churches in Japan and healthy education
Okay.
that trains alongside healthy churches, you have healthy pastors.
That's right.
So to see in some way to be involved with educating the new generation or the generation above us that wants to be pastors.
That's right.
So yes, education, but personally, I want to be involved in the local church.
Excellent. So pastor, theologian, to use those terms.
There you go.
That's
Yes.
great. That's great. Tell us a little bit about the state of the church in Tokyo.
Yeah, so Japan has, I looked this up yesterday, this is 2014 data, so
Okay.
this is very dated. But in 2014, there was about 8,000 Protestant churches in Japan.
8,000, okay.
So, and 1,000 of them, if you count kind of churches that share pastors, don't have pastors.
Okay.
So 1 in 8 churches in Japan doesn't have a pastor. So that's kind of the general state. Most churches are going to be less. I think there was a data that said half the churches are going to be less than 30 people.
Wow.
So very, very small churches.
What's the demographic of those churches?
So most of the churches are very old. So
Okay.
the average age of a pastor would be 60, 62, 63.
Yep.
And a lot of churches, the pastor is the youngest member. So you have churches where the 62-year-old pastor is the young one. He's the newbie in the
Wow.
church. and everyone is in their 70s and 80s. So
Okay. Do you know what led to that, Joe?
I don't know. It's hard to kind of pinpoint different things.
Yeah.
From what I can see personally, I think it's been a big challenge. There hasn't been a lot of culture of discipleship
Okay.
in the church, and just it goes both ways, right? A lack of want and aspiring on the young generation, but also a lack of leading probably the young generation to aspire.
That's right.
Right. So I think that's just happened a long time,
Okay.
right? And the birth rate issue, the population crisis in Japan, kind of helps that too, right? We just
So
don't
explain
have,
that. Is the birth rate is plummeting?
Yeah, so we're not having a lot of kids in the church, so you're not going to have a lot of second generation, third generation Christians, which just going to inevitably, it's going to lead to less pastors like myself,
Yeah.
or I'm not a pastor, but aspirers.
That's right.
Who have grown up in the church.
So when you look at the issue, as I hear you talk, you've got older generation not really trying and calling a younger generation to come and lead. You've got a younger group of individuals not aspiring to be pastors. But then when you talk about the birth rate, I'm thinking, if I'm a family of 3 where there's 2 parents and a child, I have a fiscal responsibility to my parents to care for them, especially in a Japanese culture, from what I understand. And if I go work at a church, I'm not likely to be able to care for my parents. Is that part of it?
I think so. I don't know how, Tokyo is a weird place.
Okay.
So it depends on kind of the place you live in. Tokyo is a little bit more progressive than probably all other places in Japan. So there's going to be less pressure on, like, say, the oldest son.
Okay.
Per se.
In Tokyo, because it's more progressive.
In Tokyo.
Okay.
But because it's more progressive and it's urban, there is an expectation of this son, and the parents, because they love their child, they want their son to be successful. And being a pastor is not the successful route, right?
Yeah.
So, and especially if you only have one child, which is usually a family in Tokyo, you're going to have 1 or 2 kids.
Okay.
So if it's one thing if you have like 6 kids and one of them wants to be a pastor,
Yeah.
then you're like, oh yeah, you're like our third son, our other son is a doctor or whatever, so you can do whatever you want. But there's the expectation of living, what it looks like for success. I think that does kind of help or hurt the current kind of culture of people not aspiring to be pastors.
So 8,000 churches in Japan, 1,000 of them do not have their own pastor. So you've got a declining church membership, an aging church membership, not a lot of young men in the ranks, in the pipeline, so to speak, aspiring to pastor. In Tokyo, tell us a little bit about the church landscape. Would you see a church similar to Third Avenue Baptist Church in terms of its ecclesiology here in the city?
So no would be the short answer.
Okay.
You wouldn't see a church like a Capitol Hill or Third Avenue Baptist Church. We're gonna have Pastor Ben Howard on soon, and YIBC has done a great job trying to foster a community and a culture of building a healthy church. So we have small pockets like that. I have a friend in Aomori who took over a church, and he is a big 9 Marks guy.
So he didn't take over. They hired him. He didn't. Okay. No host style takeovers.
He didn't barge in.
Likes 9 Marks.
Yeah,
Great.
he likes 9 Marks. And, so he. They voted him to be an elder or pastor there.
Yeah.
So there's small pockets, but you're not going to find a church like Third Avenue or Capitol Hill, especially in the Baptist world.
Yeah.
Japanese Baptist, even in the evangelical world, the expectation for Baptists in Japan is to be more liberal.
I heard that we had a pastors gathering last night.
Yeah.
Ben had arranged for us, and for our regular Missions Talk, Pastors Talk listeners, Alberto's behind the camera here today as well. He goes everywhere with us. And do you want to say hi, Alberto? No, he doesn't want to say hi. You say hi for Mark, but you won't say hi for me. Anyways, a few of the 9 Marks guys are here with me, and we had this gathering of pastors, and it was encouraging to hear. It was a small group.
Yes.
And especially there was one Japanese brother who pulled out a Japanese translation of discipling or discipleship.
Yeah.
And he basically said, we this was translated a few years ago. I just did a conference with my church, a small little getaway, and I've been telling our people, like, we haven't been doing this, and we need to do this.
Yeah.
And then he pulled out this contraband version of 9 Marks of a Healthy Church that was translated about 15 years ago. You've probably seen it.
Yeah, is he from Tokyo Bible Church?
I think that's it,
yes.
yeah.
So actually, I lead a Bible study.
Do you?
Not officially at the church, but with some friends that go to that church, I lead a Bible study there.
I was so encouraged.
Yeah, he's a great brother.
Yeah, he's been pastoring for 4 years,
yes.
I think, and around there. And he was just saying, we want to be a healthy church.
Yes.
And we need resources to help us understand what the Bible has to say about being a healthy church. So that's encouraging. I was thinking about you as I was listening to him, saying, wow, Joe, there's going to be more brothers in this city already who have this desire as you do.
Yes.
All right, so tell us a little bit. Missionaries have been coming to Japan and to this area of Japan for hundreds of years. And yet you and I are sitting here talking about, like, there's not a pure 100%, as we would understand it, healthy local church that lives out expositional preaching, meaningful membership, church discipline, plurality of elders, all the things that we hold near and dear as biblical ecclesiology. How? And what's the state of the church in terms of denominations, in addition to just the liberal Baptists that are here?
Yeah. It is a mystery, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of a crazy phenomenon, and because you do hear some success stories in some countries where sometimes even without missionaries, they've been flourishing.
That's right.
Right. But in Japan, that's not been the case. I was just on the train listening to the first episode of Missions Talk as I was coming here.
All right, you do some due diligence.
Yes.
That's right.
I mean, what you said, your story in that episode, I think just speaks true to what it's like in Japan as well, where you talked about how Mac pulled you aside when you're thinking about what to do on your PhD, and he's told you to do the church and missions, and how no one's doing the church and missions, right? And how those things come together on the mission field. And I think that's been very true of missions endeavors in Japan. Not that there haven't been churches planted. No one's against the church usually. I mean, there are some groups like that, but usually people are not against the church. But there are not been groups, and this is not just Japan, but that have a robust ecclesiology and missiology that comes with that to plant churches here. And just missionaries, just because they're missionaries and have zeal for the Lord doesn't mean they carry with them all the good doctrine of that have been in the Puritans or in the Reformation. That's just not the case, right? So so in Japan, for instance, the Baptists, right? I mean, I know older Baptist missionaries, and they're sweet and they're very lovely, but there has been a generation where we talked about the conservative resurgence before, where in the seminaries, the inerrancy of the Bible wasn't taught, and even, I mean, not even just barely being evangelical, it's barely being Christian, right? So you're going to have a generation of missionaries throughout the years that are going to be influenced by that, even if they don't affirm they don't deny the virgin birth, they don't do that. Just the lack of good theological education is going to trickle down to your normal person in the States who's like, I want to go to the nations for Christ, right? So I think there's things like that. There's some challenges in Japan that are probably unique to Japan with culture and being a little bit slower to receive probably new Western cultural influences, which is kind of a weird thing because it's not Christianity isn't Western.
It's not Western.
It's not Western.
Right. But when you see Western missionaries coming over, propagating Christianity, there's that distance.
Yeah.
So you referenced earlier Al Mohler, Dr. Albert Mohler, in the early 90s, leads the conservative resurgence at Southern Seminary. One of the things he was battling against, the primary issue that he was battling, was the inerrancy of God's Word and arguing for the inerrancy of God's Word. And there was a just controversial teaching going on in Southern Baptist seminaries at the time. some of those seminaries were training up missionaries to come to places like Japan. And wouldn't you know, here we are 30 years later in Japan. And from what I understand, the Japanese Baptist Convention struggles with inerrancy.
Yes. Struggles is a very kind word, probably.
Yeah, I'm trying to be kind. But they do not believe, many of them, in the inerrancy of God's word.
Yeah, and they're very known. I don't think they would be apologetic about it. They're known to be, they're very unapologetically egalitarian. They're very unapologetically LGBTQ affirming.
Wow.
Not that, because, Baptist, if you know Baptist ecclesiology, churches do have autonomy.
That's right.
So you're going to find churches that are going to be more conservative.
Yep.
And do hold to inerrancy. But as a kind of movement and association as a whole, it's a struggle, right?
That's right. So Japan did not have the Adrian Rogers of the day, so to speak.
We did not, yes.
Oh, it's heartbreaking to hear so much investment of time and resources and missionaries' lives coming over and propagating false doctrine. And now it's taken root in the Japanese church. And here a young guy like you, 25, 26 years old, is looking around saying, where are the institutions that hold to the same convictions that I do? So, brother, you mentioned a little bit about the contextual issue of Japanese people taking time to build relationships and learn about new things. What are some of the other contextual issues? Think about the person listening to this episode who's aspiring to serve as a missionary in Japan. What are the contextual issues that they're going to run into here as an American or a Brit or a Canadian in Japan?
Yeah, so, where to start?
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
All right.
To kind of start with the big picture, I think kind of as I go to America and kind of come back, because I went to America and I was just amazed how many churches just existed and how many of them, I was in Louisville, and a lot of them were healthy, and Bible believing, and a lot of people grew up in Christian homes. So that was just amazing. I was amazed at that. I came back and kind of thinking about, how to explain kind of the state of Christianity and Japan right now, because Japanese culture has changed very drastically, even through the world wars. Right, coming right after, and then kind of in the modern kind of now era. To kind of summarize it, it's kind of like you take Europe's post-Christian world with slam that on more of what you can imagine a pre-Christian, maybe Middle East or Asian worldview. Kind of slam those together. That's kind of what you get in Tokyo, right? Okay. So for some reason, you're going to have young people siding with kind of post-Christian arguments, even though they're not fighting against Christianity, right? Because there's nothing to fight against. But also this very traditional culture that values the family and community very strongly, wants to hold on to that very tightly, which is in some ways very good, in some ways can be a barrier. And with its own traditional religions, and with Shintoism and Buddhism and kind of just general animism, right? Cultural religion, kind of all those things kind of mesh together. It's kind of what Christianity looks like. So you're going to have the difficulties of evangelizing in Italy, for instance, or Europe, and the struggles of evangelizing in a animistic, non-Christian, never heard the gospel type of world. So.
I'm sure that's disconcerting for individuals coming over and doing cultural language acquisition, where they're encountering different cultural strains. One of them that's pretty foreign until recently, I guess, in Tokyo, with that post-Christian influence. All right. Talk a little bit about what the cost to a Japanese new Christian of following Christ. What cost are they paying?
They are, just to say the least, they are joining a minority religious group. So that's going to come with its own skepticism from your family and friends. Japan is the second largest unreached people group in the world. I think I was looking at the Joshua Project a couple years ago, and it was like 0.33% of the population and this is a very populated country.
Are evangelical?
Are evangelical.
Yeah,
So
and that's even this is a pretty broad definition of evangelical.
Yeah, evangelical is a very large group. So to join that and leave and you're saying no. So to join maybe a new, more a spirituality and a new religion can be okay if it's not monotheistic, and saying those gods and those traditions are actually not right and not real in a sense, right? That's a struggle.
So in Japan, you've got Shintoism, you've got Buddhism. They seem to be able to get along in a weird way, probably because of some of the polytheistic kind of affirmations. And then you've got Christianity coming in as a monotheistic religion and saying those are false religions. That brings some issues.
And they have a very kind of high skepticism and kind of even a fear towards what we would call, or people call, organized religion, right?
Yeah.
Religion. And Japanese people kind of think of themselves as non-religious, right? So they're afraid of these things because of, there was a terrorist attack years ago from a cult in Japan, and they see kind of different just world events surrounding religion. It's like, why would we want that in our world? And there's this kind of false notion of we're non-religious. I think that's kind of it's knowing the reason why we think of religion the way we think of religion is actually because of Christianity, because Christianity has grown so much, right? God has spread the gospel so much that it's normal to think of God as one being, right?
That's right.
But normally, if you look at the ancient Near East, there's gods everywhere, and it's actually pretty similar to what it is in Japan, right? Like it's cultural, right? We just do it, right? There's some kind of fear, power stuff, or some honor, shame stuff, kind of pressuring.
Yeah.
But you just kind of go with the flow, go with all these different religions. You're not,
seeking to live in harmony with
seeking to live in harmony. That's why Shintoism, Buddhism, and they have kind of a complex history as well. They sometimes unite, sometimes they separate. That kind of repeats himself over the years.
Okay.
But so that's kind of it's hard. There's a lot of times young people will come into church, and parents would be very concerned, probably rightly so in some sense, that their son or daughter was going to be baptized. That's a big no-no for a lot of Japanese non-believers, because they're like, well, what are they going to get themselves into? Is this dangerous? Is this are they going to shun us? Some families do shun their kids, but some cults will make their kids shun and leave their parents with no ties, right? So there's a fear of that happening as well.
So in a sense, what you're saying is Japanese understand that baptism, non-Christian Japanese understand that baptism carries some type of membership with it.
Yes,
Interesting.
They do. So
Interesting.
As a person who grew up in the purpose-driven, more seeker-sensitive movement, I was like, what's the big deal? It's just like they're just getting dunked into water. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Now, kind of learning about the significance of baptism, it's like maybe they actually understand the significance of this. There's probably wrong assumptions there.
They're probably thinking of salvific baptism or something like that.
But also they're saying our pastor Greg Gilbert from Third Avenue Baptist Church, used to say, you're taking the mic of the universe and saying, I stand with Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And and you're committing yourself to a new covenant community, to a new kingdom.
Yeah.
Right? And that carries itself with a lot of weight. So there is, I think Japanese people kind of instinctively understand that that's important, probably even sometimes more than some Christians do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. We've got a few more minutes here. I would love for you to talk a little bit about the current need. So
yes.
We are currently here in Tokyo shooting a documentary series that we hope would highlight the need for healthy, local, gospel-proclaiming churches here in Tokyo. In the years ahead, brother, I hope we have many of these conversations. Maybe not on camera, but over coffee and tea and so forth. But I would love for you just to talk a little bit about the current need in Tokyo, as people are listening to this, maybe it's a pastor, maybe it's an aspiring missionary, maybe it's someone who the Lord is just giving them a heart for this place. They don't know what to do about that. What is the need in Tokyo today?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of need.
Yep.
But I think one of the needs is what we talked about is there hasn't been, as people have done their best in different ways, groups and missionaries that have really taken a stand on what is God's plan for discipleship and how the gospel spreads to the nations looks like, and that is through a healthy local church,
Yep.
right? And that obeys God in everything it does,
Yep.
right? So one of the big needs that I see, that I'm trying to even foster with people that might not agree with all the 9 marks, is, hey, let's preach the Bible, right? So expository preaching is very rare. You're going to, whichever church you go to, evangelical, liberal, neo-orthodox type of churches, expository preaching is, you're very likely to fall into a church that doesn't do it just straight out of the gate, or they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So, Preacher's Talk is a great, great.
Shout out to our friends at City and Trust.
Yes.
Let's get a workshop here in Tokyo.
Yeah.
That would be appreciated?
That would be appreciated.
All right, let's get that on the list.
Preaching, and people want to learn how to preach, right?
Yeah.
Because there's something about, usually if you do a presentation at your work, right, you don't want to get up in front of the PowerPoint and not know what you're talking about, right? And not know what to say, right? But that's kind of how people approach preaching, right? So just expository preaching the Bible, and a lot of people will affirm inerrancy and affirm sufficiency on paper, but don't know what that looks like in preaching and in discipleship and in Bible studies, right? All they've seen probably is a more reader response way of looking at things, or a more inebriated kind of I speak what I want to say type of preaching. So that's a big need. And then just healthy churches. I think one great thing that missionaries or aspiring missionaries can do is just to be connected in a local healthy church and learn what a local healthy church looks like and the convictions and principles behind that.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I learned as much going to Third Avenue Baptist Church as I did going to the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Yeah.
And I remember being in Japan. I became a Calvinist without knowing, kind of by myself and with some friends.
Because you read the Bible.
Because I read the Bible.
There you go.
In high school, and I was learning. I started to read some 9 mark stuff and kind of being exposed to stuff. And I'm learning about, I think singing needs to have substance. We need to be singing the Bible. Congregational singing needs to look like something.
Yeah.
And those ideas were swirling around in my head, and I went to Third Avenue Baptist Church and immediately clicked. I was like, oh, this is how a church practices and applies different biblical principles that I've never seen done, right? So just learning those things and having a passion to come and be a part, whether you're an elder or a deacon or just a lay member trying to help a missions team, being in a mission team and helping them to know what a healthy church looks like and try to intentionally teach people what the Bible says and teach people, that the Bible is sufficient. And it does change lives. We actually don't need these different programs. They're nice. They can be helpful. But to manufacture conversions, we actually can just be the church and preach the gospel, and God can save people, right? So to just have your theology and your ecclesiology just really ingrained in your heart and your bones, I think that would be a great thing to think about for missionaries, and that a need would be just to bring that here. Yeah. Yes.
So teams of like-minded individuals planting healthy local churches that can live out the gospel in their communities here in Tokyo.
Yes.
We've talked a little bit about theological education. I know you have a heart to be involved in that in the years ahead. What about resourcing? Tell us about the books in that are available to you? Do you guys have 9 Marks of a Healthy Church and Building Healthy Church series, all of those books that we love?
So we don't. We actually talked about an unofficial version,
Yeah.
right? So we do not have a 9 Marks
Yeah.
of a Healthy Church.
Dear Saints have taken the English and translated in Japanese and distributed amongst their small networks.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the reasons probably why people are not aspiring, I mean, this is not the only reason, but it helps when you have, like in the States, or I could speak English, so I could Google what does a healthy church look like, or why do we sing, or what is the Trinity, or whatever, and you can hit a Desiring God article, or a TGC article, or a 9 Marks article. In Japan, you're not going to hit those articles, right? You're not going to listen to amazing preaching that not to replace the church, but to learn what good preaching sounds like and to learn how to preach well.
Yep.
You're not going to hit any of those things, right? So there's a need for just books. Recently, Gentle and Lowly got translated, which is a big plus.
Thank you, Crossway.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of great books on every level, right? You're not going to have your just that Gentle and Lowly type of book. That's a new development, right? That's like, I'm trying to give that out to people because that's like the only book I can find.
Wow.
That's in print. There's books that come in print and because no one buys them, right? And they're not probably well advertised, right? And so they go out of print, right? And now there's this generation that wants these books, but they're not available. So books, 9 Marks of a Healthy Church. I mean, the book series, it was the Conversion and
Building Healthy Churches.
That's the Healthy Churches series. And articles, like just online articles and online books as well. Like, we don't have any of those things. So all of those things are a plus. We can't, I think Mark Dever talks about giving out books. We don't have the books to give out, right? And I think that would be a great set if missionaries can come that can bring a culture of discipling, and books are helpful with that, and giving out books with books to give out, right?
With books to give out.
So if you have a heart to fund or to translate, that's a great need.
Well, I feel like that's a pretty good starting set of job descriptions, Joe, that you've helped us out with. So theological education, healthy churches. I love your testimony of just learning about the church and learning within the context of Third Avenue Baptist Church while you were going to seminary. And what a testimony of God's grace that would be here if we have healthy churches alongside gospel proclaiming, theologically precise seminaries, and then books to give out. So, all right, we've got a lot to get to work on. But by God's grace, Lord willing, we'll, in the years ahead, see a lot of these things come to fruition. Friends, that's it for today's episode of Missions Talk here from Tokyo, Japan. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much.
For more articles, books, and podcasts, please visit 9marks.org.